Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has reminded the international community of its unfulfilled promise to Kashmiris. Addressing a rally on Kashmir Solidarity Day in Azad Kashmir, Khan said Muslims across the world support Kashmiri's struggle for freedom. Khan urged India to restore Kashmir's autonomy and hold talks with Pakistan. He said the fascist Indian government is not only a threat to regional peace but also dangerous for the Indian society. Meanwhile, rallies were held across the country to express support to the just struggle of Kashmiris for their right to self-determination. The Afghan government says 16 soldiers have been killed and 2 others wounded in a Taliban attack in northern Kunduz district. Kunduz officials say 2 security personnel were taken hostage during the raid on an outpost. The Taliban are yet to comment on the attack. President Joe Biden says the U.S. will no longer support a Saudi-led military offensive in Yemen. In his first visit to the State Department as president, Biden said the war, which has created a humanitarian catastrophe, has to end. The U.S. death toll from COVID-19 has surpassed 455,000, with 40,000 deaths recorded in just the last 2 weeks. Pakistan has recorded more than 1,300 cases and 53 fatalities in the last 24 hours. The nationwide death toll has risen to 11,886. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.2 million lives and infected 104 million. And in cricket, South Africa trailed Pakistan by 166 runs in their first innings of the second test at the Rawalpindi Cricket Stadium. The Proteas ended the day 2 on 106 for 4 after bowling Pakistan out for 272 runs. Hassan Ali picked 2 wickets while Fahim Ashraf and Noman Ali chipped in with 1 each. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. We begin with the first story. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has reminded the international community of its unfulfilled promise to Kashmiris. Addressing a rally on Kashmir Solidarity Day, Khan said Pakistan and Muslims across the world support Kashmiri's struggle for freedom. More in this report.
Pakistan is observing Kashmir Solidarity Day with rallies being held across the country to express its unshakable support for Kashmiris. Special ceremonies were also held with this regard in Pakistan's embassies worldwide. On this occasion, Prime Minister Imran Khan said that the United Nations hasn't fulfilled its promise of plebiscite to Kashmiris even after 71 years. Khan urged India to restore Kashmir's autonomy and hold dialogue with Pakistan. He also said the Indian government's Hindutva ideology not only poses a threat to regional peace, but is also dangerous for the whole Indian society. Meanwhile, in a letter to the United Nations, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Indian actions clearly violates the United Nations Security Council's resolutions along with international law. Qureshi also called for the release of incarcerated Kashmiri political leaders.
Former Ambassador Asif Durrani is with us for more on this. Sir, the United Nations made a promise to Kashmiris to hold a plebiscite 71 years ago, but the Kashmiris are still waiting for the plebiscite. What, in your view, is the reason behind decades of delay?
Well, there are many reasons. Number one is political, second is economic, and the third is the regional rivalries and politics. So when you talk about the political reasons, During the Cold War, it was possible. And then when this issue started in 1948 onwards, still the world had just come out of the destruction of the Second World War. So there were not many oppositions. Even in the former USSR, they even supported the resolutions which called for the plebiscite. And mind you, it was India which took the matter to the United Nations, thinking that perhaps Pakistan would be reprimanded and then they could get the Azad Kashmir vacated, while India itself could maintain the occupation. That did not. That turned out to be, in fact, Pakistan was able to turn the tables. And in fact, and I think the American role was quite also obvious in supporting Pakistan. And then we should not also forget that most of the free world today, they were colonies of either the French or the British. So the voices and votes were quite limited. But now the situation has changed, especially after the end of the Cold War in the early 90s onwards, when the United States has emerged as the only superpower, and it turned out to be a hyperpower. So they have been dictating their terms. Just imagine that till 2002, India had a zero purchase of American weapons. But in 2020, they could purchase American weapons worth $20 billion. So when I say second aspect is the economic. So India's economic clout has, in fact, got influence on these major countries, in fact, who have to be, in fact, part of this decision-making, especially at the UN Security Council. Now, just imagine that French, they sold Rafale aircraft to India in a deal worth $5 to $6 billion. So how they are going to, in fact, not listening to the Indian version and then they listen to Pakistani version. So moral of the story is that we have to build our muscle, both military as well as economic, in order to make our voices heard. Yes.
Right, sir. So India has more economic clout. Sir, Pakistan has been consistently warning the world that the fascist Indian government is becoming a threat to the entire region. How do you see this? How serious will the repercussions be if the international community continues to keep mum?
It is, yeah. Reason being that the Second World War took place because there were characters like Hitler or Mussolini that because of their fascist policies, it put the whole Europe on fire. So here in our region, it is the Hindutva forces dispensation which got overwhelming majority in India, and then Hindutva's main, in fact, plank had been based on anti-Muslims, and then of course it's the anti-minorities, including the Christians. So they consider them as aliens or they consider them as enemies. So that's how this psyche has been well ingrained in the Indian society. So this so-called democracy, which in fact boasted to be the largest democracy in the world, has turned out to be a ghetto for the minorities, especially for the Muslims. So when you look at from that perspective, then in fact a dangerous trend has emerged in India, and its fallout would be immediately, in fact, felt by India's neighbors, especially Pakistan. And with regard to Pakistan, already we have a simmering dispute on Kashmir for the past over 7 decades. So, and then RSS-led dispensation in India, they in fact have been flexing their muscles to swallow Kashmir, which they did on 5th of August 2019. And now you have seen that it's now a year and a half that the Kashmiris are in fact in a complete lockdown. It's an Auschwitz-like situation in Indian occupied Kashmir, and the result is that world is silent. Although at the media level, the international media, for the first time has in fact brought to the world and in fact informed and to sensitize the world that what kind of atrocities are being perpetrated against the hapless Kashmiris. Yes.
Thank you, former Ambassador Asif Durrani, for talking to Indus News. And now Islamabad says, regardless of any political or religious divide, every Pakistani stands with the Kashmiris in their struggle for freedom. More in this report by our correspondent, Sumaira Khan from Islamabad.
Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi led a rally in Islamabad to lodge a protest against India's brutalities in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Speaking at the rally, Qureshi said the occupied valley is suffering under the longest lockdown due to the fascist Indian regime. He said India should be condemned at every global forum for its oppressive campaigns.
We want the global community to play its role. I'm grateful to the European Union Parliament. I'm grateful to the House of Commons, the US congressmen who have tabled resolutions. I think consistently, if parliaments, civil society, international media, think tanks, they chip in, it'll make a huge difference.
Meanwhile, Information Minister Shibli Faraz said Pakistan will always stand by Kashmiris.
Through this peaceful protest, we want to tell the international community that Kashmiris are facing the worst Indian barbarianism for many decades. India is absolutely mocking United Nations resolutions by thrashing not only Kashmiri Muslims, but also minorities in India.
Speakers at the event urged the global community and Western media to do more to highlight the plight of besieged Kashmiris. Chairman Senate Sadiq Sanjarani and Speaker National Assembly Asad Kaisar also participated in the rally. Every year around the globe, the 5th February is observed to express solidarity with the people of besieged Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir Valley. It is also observed to highlight Indian atrocities in the valley. Sumaira Khan, Indus News, Islamabad.
Pakistan civil society organized a walk in solidarity with the people of Kashmir in Islamabad. People from different walks of life gathered and condemned the state terrorism by India. More in this report by our correspondent, Munahil Ahmed.
The walk started from China Chowk to Islamabad Press Club. Participants of the rally carried placards and banners displaying slogans in support of the people of Kashmir. Chairman of Muslim Institute Sultan Ahmed Ali called on all political stakeholders to introduce a national Kashmir policy.
There's a need of national unity. Our political leaders, stakeholders, civil society, and all institutions must devise a national Kashmir policy.
A participant of the rally, Barrister Ali Saif, said the international community must pay attention to the Kashmir crisis.
The evil attempts by India to suppress the voice of Kashmiris and to sideline their issue at global forums will go in vain, inshallah. The international community cannot overlook the Kashmir crisis.
Citizens expressed solidarity with the freedom struggle of the people in the Indian occupied valley. Munahil Ahmed, Indus News, Islamabad.
Moving on, Indian police have registered a case against the family of a farmer who died under mysterious circumstances during anti-government protests. Police say his family insulted the Indian flag after a video of the last rites showed his body draped in the tricolor.
30-year-old Bhavinder Singh died on the 24th of January after going missing a week earlier. Authorities say he died in an accident, but his family refuses to believe that. Singh's brother said farmers are fighting for the country like soldiers. So draping the body in the flag was a patriotic gesture. Religious and farmer representatives have condemned the police action and warned of a massive agitation if the FIR is not withdrawn. Meanwhile, police have put iron nails, barbed fence, and barriers on New Delhi's borders with Noida, Singhu, Tikiri, and Ghazipur. The move comes ahead of the nationwide wheel jam strike announced by the farmers on the 6th of February. The Congress has also slammed the government, saying it has turned India into the internet shutdown capital of the world. Over 175 farmers have died, with several committing suicide over new farm laws, which they say expose them to corporate exploitation.
More stories after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. The Afghan government says 16 soldiers have been killed and 2 others wounded in a Taliban attack in northern Kunduz district. Kunduz officials say 2 security personnel were taken hostage during the raid on an outpost. The Taliban are yet to comment on the attack. Meanwhile, in another incident, 5 soldiers were killed and many were taken hostage in the northern province of Faryab. The provincial governor accused the Taliban of carrying out the attack, claiming Afghan forces also killed 15 fighters. President Joe Biden says the U.S. will no longer support a Saudi-led military offensive in Yemen. In his first visit to State Department as president, Biden said the war, which has created a humanitarian catastrophe, has to end. He said diplomacy is back at the center of Washington's foreign policy. More in this report.
Ever since stepping into the Oval Office, President Biden has wasted no time in reversing U.S. policies during the past 5 years. After making major changes in the domestic domain in the first week of his presidency, Biden laid out his foreign policy vision during a speech at the State Department. While he fulfilled one of the key campaign promises by ending support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen, Biden pledged to defend the kingdom against all threats.
This war has to end. And to underscore our commitment, we are ending all American support for offensive operations in the war in Yemen, including relevant arms sales. At the same time, Saudi Arabia faces missile attacks, UAV strikes, and other threats from Iranian-supplied forces in multiple countries. We're going to continue to support and help Saudi Arabia defend its sovereignty and its territorial integrity and its people.
Contrary to his predecessor, Biden took a more stringent approach to Washington's ties with Moscow. He said the days of the U.S. rolling over in the face of Russia's aggressive actions, election interference, cyber attacks, and poisoning its citizens are over. Biden also approved an executive order to restore refugee admissions and to raise them back up to 125,000 persons annually.
In Myanmar, another leader of the National League for Democracy Party, Win Tain, has been arrested as the military tightens its grip after the coup. This comes as the UN Security Council called for the detainees to be freed. Tain is a stalwart of Aung San Suu Kyi and a longtime political prisoner during decades campaigning to end army rule. He said he was being taken by police officers in a car from Yangon to the capital, Naypyidaw, but Tain did not say what charges he could face. Some 147 people have been detained since the coup, including activists, lawmakers, and officials from Suu Kyi's government. Meanwhile, Indonesia and Malaysia are seeking an ASEAN meeting on Myanmar. The U.S. death toll from COVID-19 has surpassed 455,000, with 40,000 deaths recorded in just the last 2 weeks. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.2 million lives and infected 104 million people. More in this report.
While the COVID-19 pandemic has spurred global efforts to find a cure, it has also exposed the vulnerabilities of governance systems. Brazil's prosecutor general has opened an investigation into the country's president and the health minister for negligence in response to the outbreak in Manaus City. Frustration is also mounting in Mexico as the government's vaccine registration website crashed for a third day in a row. And in Mexico City, restaurant owners are protesting lockdown restrictions that they say will put them out of business. Meanwhile, the pharmaceutical giant Johnson & Johnson has asked U.S. health regulators to authorize its single-dose COVID-19 vaccine after the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported at least 618 variants from across 33 U.S. states. The U.S. Senate, meanwhile, has voted to exclude upper-income Americans from a new round of direct payments to help stimulate the economy.
We were running about 200,000 on initial jobless claims for many years before that. So this is still a very elevated level of weekly claims, and it shows the extreme damage that's been done to the unemployment picture here in the U.S. from the COVID event.
In Europe, Catalonia's regional authorities are set to hold elections amid the third wave of the disease. Sweden says it will start developing digital vaccine certificates to be used for travel, following a similar move by Denmark. Meanwhile, Germany has strongly criticized the European Commission's COVID-19 vaccine strategy. And in England, Aston Villa's football grounds have been turned into a vaccination centre to inoculate at least 1,500 people a day.
It would have certainly seemed an incredible observation, but now that we're a year in, it seems very much the right thing to do. I'm incredibly proud that today Aston Villa is able to facilitate a vaccination centre opening at the heart of our community, and that's the right thing for football to be doing, where we can't engage with our fans live in matches, to use our facilities and our people to try and make a difference in the local community.
Iran has received 10,000 doses of Russia's Sputnik 5 as Tehran's first foreign-made vaccine. Meanwhile, in search for clues to the origins of the new coronavirus, the World Health Organization-led team says China's bat caves need to be explored to trace the genetic elements of the virus.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 53 people have died from COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. The country's death toll has risen to 11,886. The health ministry has reported 1,302 new infections overnight. The ministry says out of nearly 552,000 cases detected so far, over 507,000 have recovered. It added the number of active COVID-19 cases has crossed 32,000. The ministry said nearly 2,000 patients across the country are in a critical condition. On to the latest in business. European stocks have edged up as investors look to vaccine rollouts for hopes of normalization, while global markets flirt with record highs. Italy's FTSE MIB is leading the gains, adding nearly 1.5%. The CAC 40 in Paris has ascended over 1%. Frankfurt's DAX and London's FTSE have also edged up marginally. Earlier, Asian bourses traded higher following positive sentiment in the United States. And now it's time to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.